Welcome back to the Rusty Humphrey Show, our special Thanksgiving program here. And I want to welcome our good friend, Dr. Burt Folsom Jr. He is the author of a great book called New Deal or Raw Deal, available now in hardcover and in paperback. Dr. Folsom is a professor of history at Hillsdale College where is that? It's in Michigan, right?
Hillsdale, Michigan.
Hillsdale, Michigan.
Right.
Dr. Burt Folsom Jr., welcome back to the Rusty Humphrey Show. How are you, sir?
Rusty, I'm doing fine, thank you.
I hope tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and I hope you're ready. You're kind of taking it easy tonight, getting ready to have the big old turkey.
I'm getting ready to go after that turkey.
Now, the first Thanksgiving. I mean, we told with the Indians and the corn and all these stories. What really happened back then?
We have a fascinating story to tell, Rusty, that has to do with the economy also. Because the Pilgrims experimented with a socialist economy in the United States right off, and they did it, of course, with the best of intentions. They come over; there are about 100 of them on the Mayflower, and they get off, and they have a piece of land, and they have to make the decision: do we give each of the Pilgrims or the families a separate parcel of land, or do we have the whole land, all the acreage that we have here, hold it in common, and then have everybody farm the whole block? And
that sounds like a great idea. I mean, we're all working together, one for all for one.
Yes, it sounded that way. And of course, you're dealing with some of the strongest Christians, committed Christians, and you'd think, my gosh, there's going to be a lot of forbearance there. They will be glad to contribute to the health and happiness of their fellow community. And so, Governor Bradford, William Bradford, the Pilgrim governor, and he was reelected for many years, he supported that system. He tried it. And what happened was we had such food shortages that if it hadn't been for the Indians helping us there, and we're thinking of Squanto and Samoset and those early Indians helping us out, we might not have survived that first season because our crops were so feeble.
Did we do it? Did they do it wrong? Was it just a bad summer? What was it?
We had trouble having the work and the energy go into crop production. We have a fascinating source for this. William Bradford ultimately wrote a book called Of Plymouth Plantation. So this is the governor of our Pilgrim colony in Massachusetts, lands in 1620, goes about its business, and he writes the history of Plymouth Plantation, and he talks about the famine and the shortages and the hardship of that first year under that socialist system.
Did he talk? I mean, was it just people didn't work hard enough? Because they didn't have enough at stake there. I think that
that's what he says.
Not being able to eat would be a bad thing. I guess
you would think not being able to eat would be an extremely bad thing, but we simply had trouble getting people to put the energy into the crop harvesting and the planting and all that went with it, the care of the crops as they're coming up. All of that, we simply didn't get the kind of work ethic that produced a good harvest.
What kind of jobs did the Pilgrims have before they came over? What kind of people are we talking about?
We're talking about a mixture, but agriculture is the primary means of making a living. So we're not talking about switching people into occupations they would be terribly unfamiliar.
I mean, that would be my question. I mean, these guys were, computer programmers or something before they started farming. I know I'd have a problem with doing a farming thing.
Part of the problem they had is in order to do a lot of business back in England, you had to have licenses from the king, and the Pilgrims were on the outs. They were called the Separatists because they believed that they wanted to separate from the Church of England. And your connections with the Church of England were often influential in whether you got an urban job or not. So a lot of the Pilgrims ended up being in trouble as far as getting the licenses to do those kinds of urban jobs.
So you mean they had to get a license even in the New World from the king?
No. That was in the Old World, and that's part of the reason they want to come to the New World, because in the New World they can be free. So lo and behold, we set up this economy, and we find out that we're free, but we set up kind of a communal agricultural system, and we find out that we get some people, at least, who aren't willing to do enough work to make a real strong economic achievement in that first year.
So basically the lesson of the Pilgrims is communism doesn't work.
It is. Now, Bradford wrote in his journal, you'll find this interesting, Rusty. He said this, because the next year he decided to give everybody a private plot.
Okay.
So the next year everybody gets a private plot. We switched. And the private property order is established in year number 2. And here's what Bradford says, and I quote from this is our major source, our historical source, the book of Plymouth Plantation. And Bradford says this, the young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did complain that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without any recompense. They're talking about year 1.
Right.
And he says, the strong or man of parts had no more division of victuals and clothes than he that was weak and not able to do a quarter of the work the other could. This was thought injustice. And so Bradford says the next year, year 2, he gives everybody a private plot, and he says, I decided to assign to every family a parcel of land and see if they would use their private property to plant more and work harder to bring in the crop. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious. The women now went willingly into the field and took their little ones with them to plant corn, which before would allege weakness and inability. And then he says, by the time we got to the end of the year, we had more to spare and sell to others. And he goes on to say, any general want or famine has not been among us since that day.
Was that the beginning of private property rights in the New World?
It was.
I mean, was that because that was kind of unheard of back then, wasn't it?
Well, it was something a little new. Of course, people had private property back in England, but the idea that the state could overrule your property rights was a very common one.
The king could come and take anything, right?
Exactly.
He was the king. It's good to be king.
You were always subject to having your rights under control by the king, and part of what we ended up with the English Revolution later in the 1600s was to transfer some of that authority to Parliament, and that begins to strengthen property rights in England. But before that even happened, we have the Pilgrims over here establishing property rights in the New World. And so this inheritance that we get from the Pilgrims is very, very important. We get the heritage of Christianity from the Pilgrims, but also this heritage of private property counts, and if people have their own private property, we will see an increase in work ethic, productivity, freedom and free people produce more.
Dr. Burt Folsom Jr. here on the Rusty Humphreys Show. Why do you think then it almost seems like we are going backwards? At the first year of our country, before we were a country, the first year of the New World, we learned this lesson, and now it seems like we're doing everything we can to go back and one for all for one.
It does seem as though we've lost a little bit of our heritage, and that's why, of course, I teach history, as you know, at Hillsdale College, and in my teaching, we try to work with students to instill in them a knowledge and understanding of the past and an appreciation for the lessons of history. Mm-hmm. Lessons of history indicate that free people and free societies are more productive and happier societies than those in which we allow government to come in and play a severe role.
So the lesson of this Thanksgiving, it's not, the truth wasn't, it was a bunch of nice Indians that came and helped save the Pilgrims. It was more, hey, the Pilgrims kind of screwed up, and I guess thank God the Indians came.
Yes. The Indians bailed us out on year 1. And then in year 2, and they did help us learn to catch fish and tap into maple syrup and all of those things. Squanto and Samoset were very helpful. But the important lesson of private property is that we became a self-sufficient community, one that could stand up and one that had a chance to succeed when we practiced private property and instituted a private property order.
Dr. Burt Folsom Jr., thank you so much for the history lesson on Thanksgiving. We need more of this, and hopefully maybe the president's listening and maybe he'll learn a thing or two.
Well, I hope so.
Thank you so much. The name of the book, again, is New Deal or Raw Deal from Dr. Burt Folsom Jr. He also has a great website, burtfolsom.com, where you can check him out. Dr. Folsom, thank you very much, and have a very happy Thanksgiving.
Rusty, thank you for inviting me and having me on your show.
Take care, my friend. We'll take a quick one, and we will be right back here on the Rusty Humphreys Show.